So I first met today's guest, Stony Gossard, geez, early 1983. As I recall through Steve Turner, later of Mudhoney fame. Stoney's right-hand man at the time was this redheaded Irish kid from Laurelhurst named Chris Peppard. And they were both a couple of years older than me and both hilarious and a little more worldly, culturally speaking. I think I was a freshman. They were like juniors. Chris may have even been a senior. Um, but the three of us spent a good deal of time together listening to Alice Cooper, Johnny Thunders, playing plastic tip darts, and smoking a lot of pot. I brought Stony to my high school a couple times where I introduced him to Andy Wood, whom he'd eventually collaborate with on Mother Love Bone. That was in Mrs. Nielsen's home ec class, which I would later be kicked out of for cooking pot brownies in class, which almost cost me a high school diploma. But that's another story, if I haven't told it already. You know. Let me tell you though, Stony was a musical maven in 1983. He turned me onto so much stuff that was sort of outside of where I was coming from, which was really kind of West Coast second wave hardcore. I was listening to, a little British punk, but Stony turned me on to T-Rex. He turned me on to Alice Cooper. He turned me on to the Saints. All of those just total life changers. And 40 odd years later, I am still grateful to the man for that. Stony also made me a footnote in rock and roll history when, according to Wikipedia and Rolling Stone magazine, I kicked him out of my band, March of Crime. So I honestly, I don't remember any of that specifically, but I'll own it and chalk it up to another great career decision by yours truly. Anyway, please welcome to the show this week's Fresh Face in Hell, Mr. Stony Gossard. Stony, thank you for being our fresh face in hell.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah,
I'm very excited, John. Nice to see you. I haven't really had a chance to have a conversation with you in a couple of years. So I'm looking forward to this, and I appreciate being on your podcast.
By the way, you were two of the four people in the world that call me John are in this conversation. My producer, Jason, and you, and then my mom and this guy from Minnesota called Brock Doubles. They're the only four people in the world that call me John, and I love it. But does anyone else call you Stony besides me? I'm sorry.
I got some Stonies. I was Stony up until I was probably, 22 or 23 or something like that. So there's a few people out there that still call me Stony, and I don't even hear it. It sounds
that's good. Well, I mean, I don't want to tarnish the professional veneer or anything by getting too, but like you'll always be Stony to me, and it's such a great name.
I'm more, stuck in my adolescence than I've ever been in my life. So Stony is totally appropriate.
Me too, buddy. Me too. I know. I feel you. So I gotta say, me meeting you, 1983, I believe I was a freshman and you were a junior. You were going to Northwest with Steve and Alex, whom I think I met you through. And you really did start a musical education for me because everybody else I was hanging out, Steve and Alex, Alex had a little Aerosmith in his background, but he wasn't really celebrating it at that point. You were kind of outside of the West Coast American second wave hardcore bubble. I mean, you were turning me on to stuff that had more of a rock and roll slant. I mean, there was punk rock like the Saints, but early kind of progenitors, and then people like Johnny Thunders. And God, you turned me on to so much great music that blew my mind because I was mostly, at that point, Black Flag and Circle Jerks and TSOL and stuff like that. And so were the rest of us, in that group. So you were kind of an outlier in that way. So who were you in 1983? And how did you find your music and who was turning you on to it? Because it wasn't the same group as me.
I think I was basically like a conduit because I was also hanging around with a lot of rock kids, Mike McCready included.
The Frio Brothers.
The Frio Brothers, a lot of people that were listening to British new wave of heavy metal, early Def Leppard, Iron Maiden, Motorhead, and then via that, all of Black Sabbath, all of Ozzy, starting to kind of going back and listening to Alice Cooper, revitalizing that, going back and listening to old Kiss and thinking about that, and then sort of through that, then kind of go more glam, Mark Bolan and David Bowie. And I was just in this middle of people being excited about music and and I was just absorbing it all at the same time, going, "Oh, that's cool." And then just naturally, sort of just by the very nature of just putting two things together, because I was hearing about them or being exposed to them, sort of got to have that cross pollination of just, being in the midst of a bunch of different stuff happening at the same time.
Yeah, you were the person that turned me on to it was either Love It to Death or Killer, which in the novel I'm writing right now, we've talked about this in the past. Why doesn't anyone write a rock and roll novel? Well,
Yeah.
I'm writing this character named Ronnie Vandermeer. He's part of a larger group, but it's really covering that territory. And Killer is the record that blows his mind. His older brother
Yeah.
gives it to him.
Yeah.
You'll see there's a lot of amalgamations of Seattle characters in it, just
Yeah.
close enough that you'll go, "Hey, that's
I love
kinda
it.
like so and so meets it." I'm finally ready to do that. Nobody's
Yeah,
really
that's
ever.
funny because I've been thinking about whether, you obviously have had all this experience and you're still touched by it, when you're conversationally and just like who you're talking about and our past and, your past as a musician in Seattle. But the fact that you haven't really sort of touched on it in any of your books is it's surprising, and I think it's great that you've saved it and sort of let it all marinate for longer. I think that that's probably going to be a really good thing.
I think you're right. I mean, the danger being that it could be a little too familiar because there's so many tropes and you know,
Yeah.
potential cliches, but I think
Yeah.
I got enough insider knowledge because I did a little bit it, and you just called me a musician, which let's disambiguate on that. That's a little bit of a stretch. I was a guy with a microphone who yelled, but I have enough resources and I've had enough conversations that I really feel like I can put you in the van. Yeah, I can put the reader in the van, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so, you joined you when I think it was the second time I met you, or maybe the first time I met you at the Metropolis. I'd got word you had got a March of Crimes demo, and I'd got word that you uh, were you kinda interested in, like, kinda maybe joining the band or something, and
Yeah.
I was like, "Alright, I'll meet this guy," and I remember
Yeah.
we were at the Metropolis, and you were with Chris Peppard. You guys just cracked me up. You guys were like
Yeah.
this two-headed, sarcastic, you kinda had
Yeah.
the great repartee, you were so funny, you were
Yeah.
both a little older than me, and I remember I was coming back to, like, the juice bar or whatever, and Chris was like, "Hey, hey, here he comes," which I was designed to hear or whatever, and then we had a conversation, and I think it was and this speaks back to your sort of musical proclivities, which is that I think it was that song "Crying Evil" that you liked, which was not a classical punk rock song. It had
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
that was the more than the 4 chords and the Cream ripoff and stuff like that. And then when you did join the band, I can remember, I don't know if you even remember, but I remember the first song you wrote for March of Crimes anyway. And because it had 2 guitar parts, and I was just like,
Yeah.
"Whoa,
Yeah.
2 guitar
Yeah.
parts. Whoa,
Yeah.
that is so far."
Yeah.
And one of them was you were the rhythm part. You would go,
Yeah.
"Down, now, 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 now." This is good radio, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Ben's part would come in like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you remember that?
I
That was pretty
I don't I think I remember you telling me about it, but I don't know that I actually remember the actual song. But that sounds like something I would think
I
would
was
be
just
cool.
blown away that the sophistication of he's already thinking that must have been the Alice Cooper, the Buxton Bruce
Yeah.
connection, yeah, the 2 guitars. I just remember being blown away by that, and I think it probably sticks in my memory exactly because the biggest challenge was me is how the fuck am I gonna sing to this? I'm not a
Yeah. Yeah.
singer, I don't and it usually when my singing would have probably been la 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 la
Yeah.
la
Yeah.
la la, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know what I'd do. Uh 3 chords was hard enough. I was just impressed that you, actually had 2 t t no, that you actually had 2 guitar parts. Now, let's talk about Ducky Boys because this is a band that's almost, hyperbole in a sense, no shows, but a rotating roster, uh, that even I was sort of peripherally involved with, though I don't even think we ever practiced, but something we've resolved after 40 years is I've made peace with Rick Friel for borrowing that bass and
Yeah.
then breaking the
Yeah. Yeah.
headstock.
Yeah.
No, we had a great phone conversation. I've been
Yeah.
walking around guilty, so shout out to Rick again for being such a gracious guy. But that was the sort of, limit of my involvement. Did you and Steve have any songs? I know you
No.
had no, you didn't have
Maybe there was one riff that he had or something. I think we had 2 honestly, I think it was the grand total of 2 rehearsals, most of which was spent playing, God of Thunder no, Doctor Love, which we knew all half of Doctor Love by Kiss. So we just went, dun-dum-dum, dun-dum-dum,
that is so funny.
dun-dum, and then cowbell comes in. Mhm.
But when
That
you're a
was
teenager, just the affiliation of being in a band is something, right? I mean, it's like social currency, it's a little credibility.
yeah.
The music was kind of secondary in a certain way. It's just like a
Well,
gang or a
it was in this, yeah, it was in the spirit of seeing a bunch of people in bands around us that were actually doing stuff and just feeling the excitement about that anything is possible and that you may be no good, but along with your other four friends, collectively, you might stumble onto something just by the nature of putting, the little pieces together that you naturally have in your back pocket. Some rhythm, some idea, some noise, some, concept, whatever. That was what it was inspiring to me, and still inspiring to me in a sense. It's the same. I'm still excited about the same things I was then as I am now. And if anything, revisiting more of that, like how do you truly kind of share with people in a way that gets people uh, that creates art that really does have you know, a more than one mother.
This is why I credit you as being so instrumental in this creation of the Seattle sound because, like I said in opening, you came from outside of this punk rock box, you know? I mean, you weren't
Yeah,
it wasn't all about Black Flag Damaged and
yeah,
Wild in the Streets, and I think that that's what created you. There were other people that kinda came. I mean, you were hanging out with, like, Rob Weber and the guys from Shadow, and, like, as you said, you're bringing in a little more of this metal influence and some of this. I remember you were into Hanoi Rocks and things like that, sort of
yeah.
bands that were like the precursors of Guns N' Roses, you know what I mean? Some of the I feel like some of the similar influences those guys were listening to. And, I think that's what made it so interesting is because you're talking about, "Yeah, let's do this riff," but, like, people coming from different places, and I think, Green River embodies that more than any other band. Green River, I've always referred to it as a rock and roll petri dish, and that's what Ronnie Vandermeer, my character's novel, his band, which is called Chateau Flophouse, I kinda use Green River a little bit as a model. They're kind of a musical petri dish with people bringing kinda different influences, and, um, and it really made for kinda maybe some uncomfortable growing pains in a way, but, like, talk to me about the origin of that band and sort of the evolution to, like, finding the sound from, like, wow, this is, like, these disparate influences and then kind of hitting your stride a little bit.
Well, one thing I would say is I was watching a lot of other people put together elements that didn't sound like typical punk rock, and I think that that was going on everywhere. I mean, guys like Paul Soldier, you know, um, Ten Minute Warning, some of the, John Driver from the Boppo Boys, just people that were starting to play riffs, and playing around with, sort of a little bit more of like making up rock in the rock motif, but still that came from this place that it was all right to just have the guitar feedback for a whole verse, or to play as fast as you could, or to have somebody that doesn't know how to sing in a typical way, sort of being the vocalist, or that you could have, or butthole surfers with like, tom toms, and so all of that was kind of, it just seemed like a time where anything was possible, and the nature of it that was the most exciting was that it was all about sort of amateurism, or that being an amateur, or just your own natural interpretation of what might be musical, could be something that could make something really happen that was exciting. So coming from a place where I wasn't successful really in school, and I didn't really feel like I knew what I wanted to do, and all of a sudden, like, I could pick up a guitar and I could play something and I could remember it. And that was kind of the key, is like, I don't know what I'm doing. So, but I know when I played something that I like, and I know that I can get back to that thing. And that's all I've done since then. It's essentially finger painting, in terms of like, start with a splat, and then what does that splat look like? And then make it more of that, or make it, something else. but that's always been the kind of the approach.
So, but in addition to having just the impetus to do this, I've always viewed you as somebody who had the self-confidence to do it, to trust in the process and to I mean, by your own admission, you consider yourself you use the word amateurish, but at the same time, I always felt like and part of this, I think, is you being a few years older than me and just being a little more directed, but, like, I felt like and Andy had this in a different way, but Andy's was just sheer belief. Like, Andy was like, "I'm gonna be a fucking poster on somebody's wall. I'm gonna sell this thing. I'm gonna play every VHW hall and everything like it's Budokan." I'm speaking of Andy Wood here, for those that don't know. But you always had this sort of sense, maybe it's because your dad had a legal background, but I always got the sense that you had a organizational skills,
Yeah, yeah,
which is kind of
totally.
rare in a punk rock band.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Jeff
no,
had
that
that too. And I think
yeah.
that's one reason you guys really jibed is because you guys had a sense that, okay, well, this is great. We have all these elements, but come on, we got to be on the same page here. And we got to,
Yeah.
I mean, I think as much as anything that accounts for success. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
almost an equal part as talent is just, it took me till I was 40 years old, 39 years old to like learn that skill.
Yeah, I think that that's accurate. I think I did just from my father in terms of being able to articulate something, and then also sort of just be able to look at why I might like something and be able to articulate something about that, whatever that is. So, and I think that that's right. I think that that sort of just organizing and arranging is, I mean, how much is arranging uh in writing? I mean, you think about, the structure of your book and the sort of how to bring those elements together so they harmonize with each other. That's such an enormous, part of the equation. So, yeah, I think that's accurate. And I think with Green River, I was lucky enough to be around people that were really music fans. Like I'm always been a music fan, but I've never been encyclopedic. I don't wake up in the morning and put music on and listen to it all day. I'm not buying fucking new albums all the time. And like, I stumble into things over long courses of time and sort of like get excited about it. But, Green River was, Alex and Steve and Mark and Jeff were all like voracious music fans. You know what I mean? So they all came from these different places. So I guess if I had skill, it was just like thinking about how those things could go together, or just trying to write something that would that would be cool in the way that it would be juxtaposed to what they would normally play and see what they would do or whatever. But I was really lucky to be in that band because all those guys cared about art early, that they would talk about it. And I went to the Northwest School of Art. So that was another element of like, going to an art school and starting to learn about artists and how they made impact and thinking about, modern art or, the way that people were perceived, whether it's Jackson Pollock in terms of like how somebody could just take a style and a technique and make that have such a big impact with a shift that was anti art in a way, or anti art in a typical sense, but that could be create moving pieces of art. So I was always thinking, kind of meta in that way of how, what, and again, punk rock being this like, you know, Ace of Spades is not Mozart, but why does it make you fucking flip out when you hear it? What is it about that, um, or, different songs where it's not about the complexity or the sort of subtlety of something, but it's about a, primal percussive, you know, pulse that literally anyone could be possessed by if they were, freeing themselves up to feel free to express it.
God, I'm just so what an education at Northwest. Like we were dissecting frogs and doing pre-algebra, and you guys were talking about Jackson Pollock. Like what a, you know what I mean? Well, and that's how my son is conversing and all this stuff too, but he isn't getting it from school. You know what I mean? They're just kind
Right.
of teaching him
Yeah,
rotely
yeah.
at these schools where they test high and everything like that. But like, he's just, well,
Yeah,
I don't want to get in trouble with him here, but
yeah.
like, it blows me away about, I see in him the same sort of curiosity that we had, the same sort of wide-ranging, discover it on my own sort of like he knows so much stuff and he's learning so little of it in school. I just think Northwest just sounded like such a cool opportunity to actually like have somebody turn you on to all this stuff. Like,
And it was a petri dish. I mean, it was just like it was chaos, but it was essentially three teachers saying, we're going to start a school just like three people starting a band. It was like, so we were surrounded by this spirit of like, you can do, and, take a left, if you want to do something different, you don't like the way something is, or if you want to, you know, do something, find some friends and do it. You know what I mean? That was the spirit of the place in a sense. And also the spirit of the place was, what you read in newspapers might be bullshit, which was up until that point, that was brand new, information for an eighth grader or whatever. So, it was a good place to meet Steve Turner and Alex Shumway and think about what's possible, and to be excited about growing up and excited about something, that you could have, that would wake you up in the morning and make you go, I'm going to get out of bed. I want to get there. I want to like think about what I want to do next, or I want to have band practice, or I want to play that show, or I want to make this poster, or, all those things that, that motivates people to, find their path.
so let's talk about early days Green River, like first practice. Here's this collision of influences. Like I'm thinking about Mark was listening, him and Smitty were listening to like Ornette Coleman in the
Yeah.
Plastic Horn era.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your Alex has got like a kind of Kager Aerosmith background, but now he's very much into Iggy Pop and like, and you're bringing a little bit of metal, but kind of more of a wide ranging. You got the Saints and Johnny Thunders in there. I think a lot of the Johnny Thunders sort of rock and roll iconography when I think about you in those days,
Hmm.
because you were never like spiky haired punk rock guy like me. You were one of the first guys to like have his hair long and maybe even throw a
Yeah.
feather boa around. I mean, you had a little bit. You were kind of early on the like let's call it the glam train or something like that. But what
Yeah.
does that look like? You guys all get in the room and you guys are really, I mean, how did that work?
I mean, everyone had songs. I remember Jeff had a song that was, there was something he was inspired by, I think, Saint Vitus or something like that.
I
Or,
remember
this sort of,
Saint Vitus.
yeah.
Hear his distant screams. That
But
was
it
kind
was,
of
the idea was that, we were going to have a 6 or 8 minute song that had 3 parts. And it's like, it starts out with just noise, and then you add noise and something else. And then at the very end, it's a lot of noise. So it's like three chapters or whatever, but it was all very ambitious and mostly, not realized, in term, as you listen back, it's like, you know it's uh it's a lot of big gestures, and it's cool ideas. I'm not sure it's, you know great, but it was exciting to us, and that was the only thing that mattered, was that we went out there and, believed it, that we were doing something interesting, or we were, you know, creating new territory for ourselves, which was, um, you know, a punk rock filter on everything. It's like, any musical style that you wanted to do, you weren't going to do it well. So embrace that, and then just aim for something that sounds kind of like you would be excited about if you were at a show, aim towards something that would make you happy.
yeah. So like even when you talk about it in terms of maybe it didn't ever fully realize itself, what it showed and what makes them such an interesting Green River, such an interesting story is that it showed growth and it showed ambition. And it just I don't I can't I can't really overplay the significance of what that was. Besides just the fact that, I mean, the twin rivers of, Pearl Jam and Mudhoney are kind of born from that group of people, and like two very different bands with very different sort of like sounds, but like all of that. I mean, it really was truly just so. It's maybe like I think of it as like, and I like this about a novel too, like a novel like West of Here, to use my own work. I like to create something with this ambition where you're not even sure if it can sustain the force of its own invention. I mean, you
Yeah.
just really want to put everything you know, everything you're hungry about, everything you're
Yeah.
curious about, everything you want to do, all your aspirations, everything into this one thing. And that's difficult enough with one person, but with
Yeah.
five people, was the process naturally democratic? Does somebody emerge as a leader? Is there sort of varying opinions within the band that start to.
I mean, it's funny now, I think about all the bands I've been in, I just have, the deepest, like, not regrets, but I wish I could have been, have some of the wisdom I have now in terms of like how those things could have operated better. Cause I think bands, there's periods of time where, everybody is coming at it still with a lot of, youthful enthusiasm in terms of like, there's more of an openness to it being whatever it is. And then as it starts to coalesce around some specific successes or ideas that the band sort of, has had, things tend to, solidify and get, a little brittle. And so I think Green River's earliest material was probably, in a sense with Steve in the band and kind of us still forming, if we'd been able to kind of keep that flow going where Steve could do his sort of, faux, rockabilly noise, weirdness with sort of this Saint Vitus, fitting all those pieces together, there's a way to do it. And I almost would love the chance to try to do it again. But I think it did end up sort of, getting, more sort of rigid in terms of like what was going to be a Green River idea and what's not. And I think that's typical of a lot of bands that their sort of beginnings have a lot of, there's a certain energy and freedom to what is going on. So, um, yeah, and then it ended up being, I think I had some success because I was organizationally inclined, so I could bring in a lot of material, and I think I probably overloaded the process with a lot of material that ended up being not as good for Steve and Mark as it would be for somebody else. And I think Mudhoney showed that, very clearly. When Mudhoney came out, it sounded like Steve and Mark were like revitalized, I mean, like, oh, this is what they were trying to, they want to be unhinged. I wasn't unhinged at all. I was trying to have detail and some, I wanted to be Paul Soldier. So I wanted to have a lot of, syncopation and, I wanted to find a lot of, um, I wanted to be, like groovy, like Aerosmith, but with noise or something like that,
Yeah, and I think that showed with Mother Love Bone, which is where, you
yeah,
first branched off. I think that sounds like a band that has a much clearer vision of what it wants to be. So I know I'm a footnote in Seattle rock history on several occasions. One of them, of course, is, and it's probably hyperbolic because I don't remember, is among my great career decisions of kicking Stone Gossard out of my band. Let's chalk that one up.
I don't even remember you being kicked out. So I never felt
Yeah.
too,
No,
it was,
no,
it was
I
good.
remember it just being like,
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody was ready for 2 guitar parts or whatever, but whatever,
Yeah.
I'll take it because
Yeah.
I love it. God, what was the other one? The other one was that I introduced you to Andy Wood. You wanted to meet Andy
Yeah.
Wood, and remember sometimes I would stay over at your house and you would stay at my house, and you went
Yeah.
to home ec, and we had that home ec class with Mrs. Dudek, where every time she'd turn her back, we'd go, Dudek, And she'd go, "Who did that? Who did that?" We just drove the lady. I think we drove her to like a sabbatical, like a 2-year sabbatical. It was like me, Andy Wood, Ronnie Yates. We had a bunch of bad seeds in there. But I remember introducing you to Andy there, and that was, again, I'm just proud to be just like a little footnote, because that ended up being coming to fruition in such a big way. I mean, in Andy, I felt like you met a companion who shared your ambition to, like, we can do more than just, three-wall a club and have our friends come out and see us.
Yeah.
I don't have any other career plans, so, like,
Yeah.
why don't we just go for this, you know what I mean? Which I wish I would have figured out 20 years sooner, quite frankly. But talk to me about the genesis of that band.
Well, it's funny. I don't totally remember it. All of that history of meeting Andy and sort of Bainbridge Island, it's all sort of mushed together. Regan Hagar's, an enormous personality in my, history. And again, probably singularly, him and Andy singularly, probably anything I was involved with that had anything to do with glam or funk music, or sort of a lot of sort of the whether it's Frankie Goes to Hollywood or Queen or all that stuff. So much
Always
of that,
bigger than life. Always
yeah,
bigger than life
yeah.
with them.
So both of those guys were just, Regan continues to be my partner and, very influential in my life. Andy, in retrospect, was singular in the sense that Andy really was truly an artist, in the sense that he could write a line or play something, and again, his skill set was very limited. Although he was an excellent bass player, I don't think he ever had any formal training at all, but his instincts about songs and about space and about how to fit a vocal with the part and how to not have things too complex, he was very advanced and very, so number one, I was just drawn like a moth to the flame of his, creativity and his talent and his humor and his life
Charisma.
force. Yeah, I mean, it's just like there wasn't anyone that didn't meet him that kind of on first impression you're like, who is this guy? And then literally
Why is he
within,
so
yeah,
confident? You
yeah,
know what
yeah,
I mean?
and
Like,
well, and why is he so charming, and why is he so kind, and why is he, he's not, you know, he's cracking you up. He's including people. He's expanding the conversation. He's allowing, light in. And I was just one of the many people that was in love with Andy and just wanted to be around him. So, and I felt like I could kind of just like keep giving him riffs, and he would take things and very quickly have cool, musical and more traditional, rock and roll sort of phrasing. And I just that he was taking the piss out of it at the same time. And this is coming from a kid who just fell in love with Monty Python and fell in love with everything that was like irreverent and everything that was like, life is a farce. Um, so that, was another element, is like, well, why can't the comedy be part of like rock and roll more? Why does everyone take themselves so seriously? How could you take yourself so seriously? And if David Lee Roth gets to do that and have so much fun doing it, why can't, other people do the same thing? So, I can't overstate how big of an influence Andy Wood had on me in terms of um, just showing me more about what an artist can do. Um, and again, the same story with Mother Love Bone, a very fruitful, opening 6 months, and then just a lot of big personalities, a lot of strong, like, and it was getting closer to actual success. There was kind of talk about getting signed. There was talk
A&R
about,
guys, yeah.
yeah, yeah, there was, so the stakes were very high. And, it's so regrettable that one, you can't step back from a situation with 5 24-year-olds and say, what do we all do? And like, how do we share and make it so that when we come together, we actually are looking at the big picture first and sort of saying, what, you know, Greg Gilmore, what do you naturally do that fucking makes you great? Andy Wood, what do how do you get those pieces to kind of flow together? And I think we tried to do that, but we were just all so competitive, and we were all so like um serious in terms of our uh where we wanted to go and how we wanted to do it. I just think that the ambition of that situation kept it from delivering on a promise that Andy really could have, like, you know, it, it, we could have been simpler. We could have been more direct. We could have allowed him to just like flow more. And I think that you know, we would have benefited, but it's hard to make perfect things. You can look back and try to figure it out, but but I think we touched on some things that were pretty successful. Starter Champion, it's still like, that's fucking pretty great. That
The
song is
piano
like,
parts, the piano
oh my
parts
God.
were a
And yeah,
revelation because that's
all,
something
yeah,
in all the stuff we've talked about. You never had
yeah.
any piano parts, and
No, Andy Wood's piano writing was just it's that the simplicity of, oh, that's a chord that you've heard before, but then he tinkles it in a way that gives it some, and then where he sits his vocal across the bar, how he's fitting his phrasing in, what is his phrasing, and then what he chooses to kind of, his cadence, how he rhymes, all those things that naturally come to him. He was excellent. Chloe Crown of Thorns. That's like,
I was just
it's a
thinking of that
beautiful,
song. Who writes a
yeah,
love song about a stripper like that? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Maybe Tom Waits, but you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like it's
And
kind
it
of
was
visionary.
and it was like Andy writing a song and me writing a song, and like saying, well, why can't our songs be together? So again, it's that sense of sharing, and it's that sense of openness where you're still thinking anything's possible. You got a song that doesn't have another part. Maybe there's another song that goes, like, just, it's that state of mind of being open-minded about it, or that, and again, I think that there was a period of time where that was, we were really hitting that. And then, you know, by the nature of all our personalities, it got more tight. And as Apple is not as successful maybe as some of the other earlier records, because I listen to it now and I want to fucking kill myself for having written such overly complex arrangements where I'm doing a lot of run-on sentences. I'm not stopping where I need to stop and let space happen. You know what I mean? And and everyone's trying to go with me, and follow me. And Andy's doing his best to try to like figure out something to sing over the top of it, but it's cluttered. And it's too much of a guy sitting in his room adding on to something he's already written. There was a moment of inspiration at some point that if he had just stopped and brought that in and played it, and everybody kind of figured it out together, that would have been a better, approach. But so that's, those are some of the regrets I have, in listening back, is that it's, given that Andy Wood was a singer, I would have written differently for him, with a bigger point of view, than I had at
Well,
the time.
you're impressing me here first with your humility, but also you're dropping some serious wisdom here. Because from outside, I was friends with all of you guys, but I had moved to the Bay Area. I remember when you guys came and played like the Cactus Club in San Jose, and it felt like a reunion to me because I was lonely and desperate, and I came down and saw you guys play. But it was still, I was so proud of you. I was playing anybody who had listened to that record, which, by the way, you're being kind of hard on yourself in a way. I mean, maybe the album doesn't age. I think part of it is the production. It was very slick and it was very of its time. Do you know what I mean? It was very of the moment. And sometimes just stuff that's of the moment, that moment doesn't age well. I mean, let's look at like, 90s fashion. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it seemed like a really good idea to wear long johns under shorts and you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And maybe it
It makes
doesn't age
sense.
so well. Yeah.
It still makes sense to me, because that way you don't get your pant leg stuck in
Yeah.
the chain, the sprocket.
Well,
That's why,
plus you're a shut-in now anyway, so who
yeah.
cares,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm not even wearing pants right now. Um, I like this direction where I just I'm dropping a name on you because I mean, as much as I can't think of I can't really think of anybody who's been more a part of Seattle collaborations, various collaborations. I mean, from whatever, from March of Crimes to Ducky Boys to Temple of the Dog, Green River, Mother Love Bone, Mookie Laylock, Brad, and Who am I forgetting? Oh, right, Pearl Jam. So I want to just drop some names on you and give you a chance to just like say a few words or your impressions or memories, anything, story, whatever. Just like I'm just going to drop them on you impromptu. Chris Cornell.
Um, you know, I Chris Cornell is he's the king. And as far as in thinking about somebody who could deliver and somebody who understood music in a way, um, he's just he's just he's just the best. And I just thinking about it just is heartbreaking because I just wanted him to be able to just do what he wanted to do and not have all the pressures of life fucking destroy him
It's
in
I look
some
at this
way.
list and it's sad because so many people I'm gonna bring up have stories like that. I mean, Kurt has a story like that. Andy has a story like that. People and I think part of it, Chris is a little different in this way, but part of that has a function of, like, you guys having so much coming at you at a younger age, I feel like. Not like you started to I didn't have any success at all until I was 39 years old, and when I did have success, it was a drop in the bucket compared to what you guys all, experienced, but, like, it is really sad to separate the artist from the person. So let's go to somebody who's still alive, really kinda your oldest collaborator at this point, and that's Jeff Ament.
Yeah, Jeff and I are, the way I feel it right now is like we're kind of in our honeymoon now because, Jeff and I have always been, we've always sort of had an adversarial artistic relationship in the sense that Jeff is he understands a lot. He reads voraciously. He listens to music voraciously. He's has strong opinions about, what he loves and what he doesn't. And I've tried, in a sense, I've always tried to. I mean, I've tried to keep up with him, and in a sense, I want to like, go toe to toe with him, but I could never do it because he's too worldly. Um,
Oh, man, listen
you,
to the
you
humility. You're like one of the most well-read people I know, by the way. I don't know if people know that
Well,
about you.
yeah,
Yeah.
I read a lot, but anyway, but the main point being is that we spent, the first 20 years of our lives sort of grumbling about each other and sort of feeling like if we would only listen to me or if they only listen to Jeff, either both of us would be happy or whatever. But it's so funny our situation now. I just have so much gratitude for the fact that Jeff and I stuck it out because it was really a relationship that could have very easily changed or ended at some point. There's just so many times I look back where I was just fed up and I just was like, he doesn't understand or he's like blah blah blah. And I look back now and I go, oh my God, thank God I didn't do that because I would have been losing out. It would have been me that lost out. It would have been me by not trying to understand and go with and allow artistic tension and personal struggles to be part of the equation. You can't. There is no perfect band. There is no perfect families. There is no perfect uh, scenario where everyone is satisfied. So it's more now like understanding so how much we got out of the idea that we both were having different points of view and different sort of ways of wanting to approach something, um, and that our sacrifices for each other and I think he's made plenty for me as well. Ended up being the alchemy of why we've had so much success. So the main thing is just like gratitude for Jeff Amen and just the feeling of like just because you think you are working with a person that you're struggling with, and even if you're struggling with them for 20 years, doesn't mean that it's over, and that there is a way and an opportunity for rebirth and renewal. And I think I don't think Jeff and I have had a we haven't crossed swords in 20 years really. All of that is history.
So many thoughts when you say that. A, having known you guys both for over 40 years, I've never heard either of you express frustration about your working? There's always a mutual respect there. There had to be, even if there was tension or a clash of ambitions. And in some ways, you guys were on the same page too, and I think that's what shines through. Like, also, you guys have just done such a good job of managing that. Like, and part of that's just, let's be honest, it's just PR and professional responsibility. Like, there are so many bands that are a hot mess and everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that even enhances their, like with the
Yeah.
Kinks or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of part of the charm, like Dave Davies coming in the middle of the show and like kicking his brother in the nuts or something. It's part of it. But with you guys, and I mean, I don't know if this is, it's always been handled so maturely, I guess, and, like, so, like, I kinda, when you say that about that, I just think about you and Jeff on this kind of parallel lines all these years, so it's really
Yeah.
interesting for me to hear you say that, and then you add another big personality in Ed, who knows exactly what he wants and really kinda comes in and really, I don't wanna say it's
Yeah.
take over, but kind of
Yeah.
becomes the focal point, and
Yeah.
not just because he's a singer, which often happens, like the singer's the front man, so
Yeah.
but just like visionary wise, like how did that, like if you and Jeff are already kinda like at loggerheads at times, and then you bring
It's
in Ed, did he bring you together, or did he make
yeah.
it like a three-way chaotic,
I think it's the force of his artistic talent, his personality is just naturally, you're I our fights, Jeff and I's conflict became less meaningful when you have somebody like Ed in the band, because suddenly you have a completely different aesthetic coming in, and trying to find what the three of us do together and why we've been successful. I mean, that
beyond
continues
just
to be
having a great voice and needing a singer?
well, and what elements are we bringing to what he's doing that makes him sound more original, and and what elements is, it's really discovering over and over again, why we share, and what makes it good, because it's Ed going off and making solo records and kind of doing exactly what he wants to do on everything, or being with us. It's very different kinds of, sort of situations. So, I think that it's really, we continue to, grow with each other. We continue to uh, try to, accommodate each other, and try to, see what's possible. I mean, I think I'm as ambitious as I've ever been, not overtly in terms of like, I need, it just in terms of like whatever record we make or whatever thing that we do, that we do it with as much art as we can, like that we do it, uh, that hopefully it's the most original that we can be. And I think that we've still got, I mean, I think we've got a ton of room to grow still, honestly. I want to make, I would like to make different records. I want to
So,
make,
edify me a little bit here because I've met Ed a few times, but that's about it. I don't have a relationship with him like I do with you and Jeff, and it's been a while, but Mike, where was Ed coming from? I mean, besides San Diego, what was different about his musical? I never really have put that into the whole gestalt. Like, I know where you
hmm.
and Jeff kind of evolved musically. What was he listening to, and
Well,
what
he
was
was, yeah, I mean, he listened to a lot of different stuff. I mean, he had his own aesthetic in terms of the tunes that he was singing, but I think in terms of where his natural phrasing is, where he hears the one, where he hears phrasing, where he hears opportunities to sing, that was all brand new, and it's still a work in progress in terms of like what kinds of things attract his ear, where he's uh, what you want to do is write something that he will just start singing. You don't want to ask him to sing. You don't want to say you should sing on this. You want him just to sing because he's inspired. And so trying to figure out what that is, and also trying to do that in a way that feels artistically, exciting to you and to Jeff and Mike and the four of us as we write. Um, it's a there's a lot to consider, there's, it can be, anticipating what somebody wants sometimes works, and then sometimes the very thing, the last thing on your list, which was a throwaway, ends up being the thing he's most excited about. So you get this contradictory, sort of unexpected sort of shifts that go on. So you just try to do your best to like come in, collect your box of ideas, be ready for anybody else's ideas, and then just kind of try to just take a deep breath and just try to play the simplest thing that makes sense to you. Usually that's where I try to start if I can.
So you've learned, because that's kind of the opposite of what you were describing in Green River, which was to try to
Yeah, yeah.
try to create the most complex, which is something I completely relate to. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
That
It's the
challenge of
Iron
trying to
Maiden.
pull off the impossible.
Yeah, it's like I want to be an Iron Maiden, so therefore I need to like fill every ounce of space up with my ideas, so there's not even any room for anyone to like, ruin it. You know what I mean? Like,
You know who the poster child of that phenomenon is? I'll
who?
give you a hint. Some big old chunky Hammond chords coming over the middle, like, and then comes the voice. Michael McDonald. Dude, but I gotta, don't get me started. I mean, music, you need space in music. And that guy comes in with these big chunky Hammond chords, and then his voice just sounds like another big Hammond organ that's like, talking.
I never thought about Michael McDonald as being a cluttered, overly
He ruined the Doobie
Byzantine.
Brothers for me. They
Oh,
had like
yeah,
all
okay.
these different vibes and spaces and
Yeah,
rhythms,
yeah.
and all of a sudden it's just like
Okay.
all this middle bandwidth
Yeah.
just coming at you like a fucking
Okay, yeah.
big shot of bad breath or something.
I'm not I love some Doobie songs, but I don't know their lineage in terms of when Michael McDonald joined and sort of like who the singers are, and sort of like I don't have quite enough knowledge to sort of like, but yeah, I'm sure you're touching the base with someone. I'm sure somebody's going, that's exactly right. McDonald
I'm actually
ruined the
probably angry.
Doobies.
I must say, I do love the Christmas album. That one gets a little airtime just that airbrush photo. He looks like the silver-haired fox on the cover. It's beautiful.
He's undeniable original tone, Michael McDonald. There's no
Yeah, well, no,
question
the
about that.
husky white guy singing like
Yeah.
a black guy kind of thing. He was
Yeah.
Bill Shamplin's another Joe Walsh. No, not Joe Walsh, but what's his name? The guy that wouldn't license any of his music. Like a rock.
Oh, Paul Seeger?
Yeah. Yeah, Bob Seger.
Bob
He was
Seger?
got that school of sort of husky white guy singers. Bill
Yeah.
Champlin being the most underrated. So
Okay.
next, I want to come back to Mike McCready, but who we paid tribute to the other day as just being, at the risk of sounding repetitive, I want to get your impressions of working with Mike. But I always just have to say, God, he was so gracious when you guys started, like when you guys blew up. I just remember him just like being so nice and almost embarrassed of the success, and just such a sweet guy.
Yeah.
Get your impressions of Mike. Then now throughout this whole continuum.
That was Mike McCready, thinking about like what I did on guitar naturally and what I didn't do. Mike McCready was like, he was a dream come true in the sense that, you know, he always wants to be in that state of mind of whatever is next will reveal itself in terms of how his playing sort of naturally wants to be when he's at his best. He really can live in that, on that edge, which is something that I've never really been that very comfortable with. And I've always found myself wanting to have, arrangements that I could just keep getting back into and really feeling and always trying to create the space that I needed, but really having this script, having a script that I was going to, stick with, because that's what I was good at, or that made sense for this band. But I think his ability to be present and to react to music in a way that, in the same way that I, his love of Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan and the Rolling Stones and all these like sort of, these musical heroes of ours, and the way that he sort of uses that language to kind of, enhance songs is amazing. I think Mike's humility, first of all, his sobriety, which is a beacon for so many people, so many different people. He's touched their lives by giving them some optimism about, one, that they can quit doing drugs, and two, that their life doesn't have to, it's not, that you can still have fun. and still find joy and still find creativity and still find a love, and if anything, maybe more than you ever thought that you could. So many people use drugs as a vehicle to kind of expand um their perspective, or or sort of stimulate some creative juice. But and I suppose there's elements that it can be that, but once you've sort of
There's a line.
ex yeah, well, and if anything, it becomes very insular, and you end up rewriting the same. It's like the guy that smokes pot that can't stop writing the 1,200-page book. And what's that movie? I can't remember.
Wonder
Anyway,
Boys.
Wonder Boys,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is the best.
I know.
Like, I
No,
can't
it's my
stop.
favorite.
I can't stop. He's
It's
like
by far my
fucking.
favorite Michael Chabon book too. That book is
Uh,
so funny. I love it.
it's a wonderful character, and that it just so you know and his humility that he's gained from that, and the fact that he still goes to meetings. I mean, Mike McCready's at meetings at the at the the seediest parts of town in Minneapolis on a Saturday morning after playing a rock show in the night before with 20,000 people screaming his name. And then he's hanging out with people that are just going, I fucked up again, and I blew it, but I'm gonna get back to where I need to be, because I need that. So me personally, having just about a year and a half ago, I quit smoking pot, which was the big deal for me. And not so much that it was like that difficult, but once I did it and I started kind of peeling back the layers of how much it sort of was like kind of controlling my life and separating me from people that I love, I feel like this sense of relief and a sense of just some regret, but mostly relief that I have this opportunity to like go, oh my God, like, everything's going to be fine. And, I wasn't like a heavy, take 20 bong hits every day, but it was more like, I needed to smoke a little bit every day. And it became consuming to me in a way that was, and I did it for 30 years. So it's just, anyway, I'm sort of waking up from that, and with Mike McCready on my mind, thinking about how strong-willed he's been, being in a band with everybody's like, drinking still, and whatever, and he's just hanging on to what he needs to hang on to. And
Well, it's got to be
uh,
easier. You guys, every time I drink with you or Jeff, you guys are drinking wine. I'm like, oh my God,
yeah,
come on, wine. You got to be fucking kidding me. You guys went from PBR tall boys to wine. I'm like, is
oh
this
man,
what success does to you?
yeah,
Next
fancy
guy,
wine.
unheralded, also a tragic ending. Not, I mean, I have many friends that well outside of Seattle that love Sean Smith, but when I talk about Andy, I often think of Sean, who, another sort of musical visionary in that way, wrote the piano parts, great songwriter, uh, very, eclectic influences.
Yeah, Sean Smith, Regan Hagar. Again, meeting Sean Smith at Tower Records. Sean had been in Seattle for probably 6 months or something like that, having moved up from Bakersfield, California. The reason why he moved up is because he read Lord of the Rings, and he was inspired to think, I got to go on a vision quest. I've got to go, you know, find my people. I need to, go on the road. And he ended up, working at Tower Records, and handed a demo to absolutely the best person he could have ever handed a demo to, which was Regan Hagar, with his multiple rings and his, bobbed haircut, and his eyeliner, and, the fantastically, ambiguous, um, sexually ambiguous, but dead sexy nonetheless. Um, and, again, lucky enough to have been in a situation with, Regan Hagar's, encyclopedic understanding of all the music that moved him. Sean Smith, huge funk, um, and R&B and soul lover, but also loved all rock and roll. and to kind of find that situation, randomly asking about a friend who had a bass player friend in California named Jeremy Toback, never heard him play before. He came up and we recorded and wrote all of that record in a 2-week period, basically, the first Brad record. And once again, like, we wrote some great songs after that, but the spirit of let's meet in Seattle. We don't have any songs. I bet we'll make a great record. I've never heard the bass player play before. We don't have any songs right now. I love that. That's just like that's like rock climbing right there. That's like straight up just, hanging off a cliff and just saying, well, why not? And what
Such a great
and
record.
yeah. And so like barely holding together, but yet the vibe of it is like was very different from what was happening in Seattle at the time. And I'm so proud of that experience, and I long for those sorts of, again, us against the world sort of feelings of, yeah, if we just, again, probably smoked, if we hadn't smoked so much pot, we probably possibly would have made a better record. But it was definitely,
That record's pretty good, Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I mean, it's good enough that I just called
Yeah.
you Stone.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
it's
It's
firm.
like, I'll let you go so far with the humility, but at some point you gotta own the vision, my friend.
Yeah.
There's so many other people I want to talk about here. We're winding down, but like we got to talk about my pal Alex Shumway, because poor Alex, he's like me. All our friends became famous and still love the music still.
Oh,
but,
man. How about
never
his
got a
band?
cat.
The Deception is
I know they're
fucking
great
hot
on Loose
shit,
Groove
man.
Records. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that like Alex Shumway playing guitar is a revelation to me. You know what I mean? Like his writing is as, authentic as it could be in terms of understanding what was great about hardcore and the way him and Regan and Sam, who's a fucking great singer, I think that band is fantastic. So I'm a huge believer in The Deception, and I dare I say it, as Alex is a greater guitar player than he is a drummer and a songwriter.
Yes,
So
I would agree with that. And he's quick too. I mean, I asked
Oh
him
my
for
God,
some
he's-
riffs once for something, and I
Yeah.
mean, within an hour, he sent me like 12 different things to choose
he
from.
approaches it in exactly the right way, like fucking caveman. Like, just don't make it too complex, like so it's tough, and I'm thrilled for Alex. I love that he's out there playing, and I just The Deception, they're gonna be huge. Come on, it's gonna happen, I think.
He just loves it so much.
Yeah.
It deserves it. Oh man, this has been
And
so fun.
and Lance Mercer now in the band. I don't know if you know that or not.
Yes,
but,
I did.
yeah,
I mean, it was a
yeah,
perfect fit. Well, now you got your photographer built in too. That can't
yeah.
hurt.
Yep. One of the nice Boppo, as he referred to himself as. Well, John, we can do this, and then we'll do it again, and we'll do part 2 at some point.
Yeah, well, I think
Yeah.
a book club between you, me, and Jeff would be fun too, because you guys read so much more than me. I can never get past my blurb pile. But you know what I'm doing? I'm finding new music. I find that ironic. I'm always like on the search for new music, and you guys are like you're reading everything on the new fiction.
If I was an author, I would not be able to read, honestly. If I was really like in my process of trying to figure it out, I don't know if I would. First of all, how many hours a day? I couldn't. I've got young kids, so it's like that would basically be I don't have time to hang out with anyone, But
there's part of
no,
it, and then there's the anxiety of influence, and then the main thing that gets me is I start reading, and I'm like, I just want to go do it.
yeah,
I'm like,
oh, yeah, totally.
I'm loving this. I'm loving this.
Yeah,
But you know what? I
yeah.
love even more is actually
Yeah.
just doing it. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna set
totally.
this great Jess Walter book aside for a few minutes, and I'm gonna go write.
Yeah. Is
And-
his new book good?
It's great. We just
Okay.
actually he airs this week. I just interviewed him last week.
Okay,
So
great. I
listen in.
have it. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm gonna check
read
it
it.
out.
Read it this week because we're doing
Yep.
it kind of a book club. There'll probably be some spoilers, but listen in.
I really enjoyed Heart of Winter. Thank you so much for that. That was a freaking great effort from you. So thank you. That's it was I mean, first of all, writing about old folks is perfect for us because we're just so close to just fucking breaking.
we were
the-
always into like wingtips and cardigan sweaters and. I was
but
born on-
it's a beautiful book. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Death, Taxes, and Pearl Jam. Count on him, people. He is Stone Gossard. He's a rock and roll legend, and I love him. Thanks for being our fresh face in hell this week, buddy.
I really enjoyed it. Let's do it again.